Fansided dropped an interesting tidbit yesterday, 2 days ago, something like that they believe the Pittsburgh Steelers could be in the hunt for the Baltimore Ravens star offensive tackle, Ronnie Stanley. He's 30 years old. He'll be 31 in about a month. You look at him as a dude who is one of the biggest, maybe top 3 biggest names at the tackle position, would come in here and be the best player that they have on the offensive line, without question. Teams up with another veteran, Isaac Seumalo, at left guard. Probably leaves plenty of question marks for Broderick Jones, but there are arguments to be made for certain players to say worth the risk of kind of ignoring Broderick. I don't know if Ronnie Stanley's it, but I'm curious in your response here, your thoughts on the situation. I would imagine he's a $20 million a year offensive tackle, somewhere right there. Don't get me wrong. If you're going to spend money anywhere, spend it in the trenches every time. There should be no debates on where the Steelers' money should go or any team's money should go. It is in the trenches. But the Steelers have also built the trenches. They've drafted the trenches. They've spent good investments on the trenches, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So at that point, you have an actual debate of Broderick versus a name like Ronnie Stanley. I mean, is he worth it? Is he a name that you go out and get if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, or at least consider?
It certainly helps your offensive line next year. I think Ronnie Stanley, even at 32 years old, which is what I think he'll be, or 31 years old, whatever.
31 by the season.
Going into the season, I think if you just put him on that left side of the line next to Isaac Seumalo, your offensive line is obviously going to be better day one. It does still bother me that you drafted in the first round, you traded up in the first round for a left tackle, and you would be now 3 years going into the final year of that left tackle. Well, I guess including the 5th year option, the 4th year of that left tackle's career, and have yet to give him a real shot at left tackle. I think that would bother me a little bit, but at the same time, you look at Ronnie Stanley, he's a guy that gave up 2 sacks all of last year. Like, you immediately get better. And we've talked about 3 players on this episode. That is your only move. If you're spending $20 million on a left tackle, that's your splash move. Everything else has to be, peanuts, has to be, value moves the rest of the offseason. So do you want to build it in the trenches? Some people would say yes. I think I've agreed with that. But I also think that if you give Broderick an opportunity, he will get better on the left side. So I'd like to see Broderick get a chance, but it's hard to turn down Ronnie Stanley at $20 million because you're getting an anchor on the left side of your line, and that the back end of your line, the back end of your quarterback is always going to be protected.
Yeah. I mean, there is not a name out there who's a better option than Ronnie Stanley. And to bring him over from Baltimore, I mean, you just screwed the Ravens, who now have to figure out who's going to protect the blind side of Lamar Jackson, and just defended your quarterback better than you possibly can. I hear the Broderick argument. I think I stand with the Broderick argument. Like, you got to give your guy a shot. There's a 10-year age gap there. You have to take that into account. If Broderick works out, you still have his entire career to build and see if this guy could turn into Ronnie Stanley. You're going to get Ronnie Stanley for another 2 years before he's walking away from the game completely or looking for somewhere else to go win a Super Bowl and sail off into the sunset at the end of his NFL career. And then you're right back to square one. Where do you go from there? How do you figure this out? I think that is a massive question that you have to bring into account. But it is Ronnie Stanley, man. Like, it depends on where the Steelers realistically see themselves, or I guess where we realistically see the Steelers, because we will see them much more realistic than anybody in that building. In the next 2 years, if you believe that you could build a team good enough to win a Super Bowl, you go after a guy like Ronnie Stanley because, you're not going to take that risk at such an important position. At the same time, if you don't see that, if you say they could, it's a possibility, but chances are it's not going to happen, Broderick Jones is the 10 times better move, because if he works out, you have just found a guy that could be there for 10 years. And that's your window goes from 2 years to 10 to try to figure this out and win a Super Bowl. If your offensive line is built, which that's what the Steelers have done, they've built an offensive line that at some point is going to cost $1 billion. But that's okay because you spend money on your offensive line. You do what the Eagles do and don't let these guys ever leave. If you could do that, if that's what you've just done, is you have that set of guys, that means you have 10 years roughly to figure out everything else. So that is the best starting point for any team. I mean, Ben, when he was putting up 40 points a game and the Killer Bees were the greatest thing on turf, nobody appreciated the Steelers' offensive line the way that they should, because that offensive line was around forever. It was phenomenal for years on end, and Ben did crazy Ben things, but that offensive line was wild, and that is such an underappreciated part to a team. If you could do that, I just think it favors Broderick. But this is his last shot. I mean, we also have to acknowledge that in the same conversation. If it doesn't work out this year, he's gone. You can't even he may be a swing tackle, great for the final year of his deal, but you don't go into year 4 thinking we're going to give him one more shot. I get that's what they did with Dan Moore. I think you learn from your mistakes and say, this hasn't been the case. Mason McCormick and Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier look phenomenal. Broderick looks terrible. You know, at that point, you just got to say, okay, we got to figure this out. We'll trade him while we have some value there and you move on. But for right now, I think I agree with you. I think I'd go Broderick over Ronnie Stanley in this situation.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to the fact that you have put so much into Broderick Jones.
Yeah.
And you've never let him really flourish in the position that he was great at Georgia. That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, some guys aren't born to be a swing tackle. And I've seen a lot of people saying, well, Broderick was so bad, why would you even give Broderick a chance? It's like, well, if it's so easy to switch sides, why didn't Dan Moore?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't. Because he can't do it. Because he would be worse than Broderick. So for everybody that likes to bury Broderick, I think you have to see him at his natural position because it does make a difference. And I think the Steelers are thinking the same way. I don't think they would go out and sign a Ronnie Stanley for 2 years or for $20 million for however many years. But I think that I'm interested to see how it plays out next season. Let's just say that. It's one of the things I'm keeping my eye on the most from day one of OTAs throughout the entire season.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm interested to see if the evolution is there because remember, I mean, early in training camp, I was saying Troy Fautanu stinks. I was big on the Troy's getting smoked by TJ out here. It looks bad. And I was not the only one. I would stand there on the sidelines and sometimes even fans behind me would be like, man, the rookie's not really looking good right now. And I'm like, yep, I've been saying that for weeks, dude. Weeks. Yeah. And then he turned out to be phenomenal. So I am interested to see the evolution. I mean, that seemed to happen with everybody. I don't know what it is about Latrobe, man, but you show up, you are not good. And by the time you leave, you're great. Justin Fields, Troy Fautanu, a couple others in the making there. Or it goes the complete opposite way. I remember the year James Pierre looked like the superstar corner the Steelers have been missing forever. Mm-hmm. He was it. Picked off Ben twice in one day, cried in a press conference afterwards, speaking about the challenges of getting here. I was like, dude, this is the guy. They just found the next Darrelle Revis. And, well, here we are. Here we are today.